And we're back. So welcome everybody back to Fatso Radio. We are in episode number 51, and I have our good friend here, Rick Waechter and Donato Waechter. So Donato, how are you? Welcome, my friend. And let's just start off. Welcome both of you back to the show. It's the second time. And like I said, thanks so much for being back, guys.
Hello.
Yeah. So, Donato, I think we were talking just before the show started how you wanted to kind of kick off and start us off, I guess. Did you have anything you want to share?
I was actually going to put what my dad was saying into less complicated things. That's what I was going to do.
Well, you're not going to do it the whole time, buddy.
I know, just for the starting.
No, you're just going to say a quick hello or two messages. What's coming up here on the farm soon with our sheep?
Lambing season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. See, Donato's got some friends at school that think being vegan's a good idea. And why does this disturb you, buddy?
Because I don't want my friends to die early.
Or get sick, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. See, Donato is a firm believer in eating healthy meat.
Mm-hmm.
And what else? So what else have we got going on? We got lambing season coming up. Okay. Mm-hmm. And how many twins did we have last year, buddy?
I think all of them except one.
No, it was all in but 4 sheep.
Right.
Yeah.
So Donato, maybe you can tell for my listeners and my viewers, what exactly does lambing season mean? What does that mean? To me, it seems like that means that the lambs are getting born.
2 or 3 months where lambs are being born.
Awesome. So is that usually the spring, or does it depend?
Usually, I think late February to early April.
Yeah, it's usually late February to the end of March. And some will come outside of that. That's just the law of nature.
Okay.
You always got. And very busy time though, because we got a tag ears, and that includes him too. He's tagging ears. We're docking tails, checking the health of the baby animals.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Then when they're 3 or 4 days old, you can't catch them again, can you?
No.
Are they that fast, really?
Really fast.
Wow. And then at what point, again, can you catch them? When do they start slowing down?
It's not that they slow down. What happens is I just set up a really good corral system when they're older, okay, when they're not not little baby lambs, they're bigger lambs. Like when people hear us processing lambs, I think they get the wrong image. They don't understand that we're taking in like a 70, 80, 90-pound animal, sometimes over 100 pounds. It's not cute and cuddly anymore.
One is bigger than me.
Oh, they're pretty much all bigger than me.
Yeah, but it's a lamb that's bigger than me.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, Rick, because a lot of the kind of pushback I've gotten over the years was really around, a lamb. Because to me, lamb is among the best meat in the world, right? So, I mean, especially from vegetarians or vegans, how can you eat a lamb? It's such a young, innocent. It's not 4 days old, right? So it's months old, right?
Well, you wouldn't get anything off of it.
Yeah, exactly. And how old again?
It's a bone.
Yeah, buddy. All right.
Leg bone.
How about you say hello to Carlo's audience, and then you go watch your show, okay?
I thought it was bye, not hello. I said
hello. Say goodbye. Say goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you, Donato. Thank you for talking.
What?
That's great. But no, that's a good point about many good points there, but definitely about, the influence of, the vegetarian or the vegan push, into the schools. So there's a testament right there, right? I haven't seen it too much in my kids' school, but already it's starting it, but I do see it in the media, right? And they're pushing for children. We can get right into it, but where do you think that most of that is just coming from? Is it just their parents are seeing social media, or is it coming from the system itself?
For these messages?
Yeah.
You know what? There's a lot of agenda behind it, right down from people's beliefs. Like you get certain organizations out there. I think we all know who they are. I'm not going to sit here and start naming and shaming. It's not naming what I'm doing, but these organizations have their agenda. Some of them are just, some of them are outright stated, and I've read their thing where they just simply plan to end animal agriculture.
Yeah.
And just to give you an idea, animal agriculture, we're not just talking meat, we're talking milk, we're talking fiber like wool, cashmere from goats. We're talking egg production. Okay, it's a huge portion of our food, our living. We'll probably get into this a little bit later because I want to talk about a little bit as humans evolved and just how dependent we were on animals, animal agriculture, or there's still like the Saanen people in northern Norway who just live almost entirely off of a reindeer. You know, eating meat, living off the clothing, the bones, you name it. So there's, anyways, to go back to it, there's people with agendas. I'll give you an example of one that just will drive me nuts because it's just not true. And they're talking about the cruelty of shearing sheep. And my first question to people is, who hasn't had a haircut or who hasn't shaved in their life? And looking at yourself there, Carlo, on this image, I see that the grizzly beard has disappeared. Okay, well, shearing for sheep, which is very necessary for the wool breeds, okay, unless you put them in a really thick bushy forest where they can shear themselves, okay, and you know, that's not very reliable. All shearing is giving sheep a haircut. And yeah, they'll look stressed when they're doing it, but sheep will also look stressed when you're about to give them a treat too. They're very frightful creatures. That just comes from the nature of avoiding predators. However, if you ever watch shearing, like especially here on the farm, they'll protest and they won't be happy when you grab them and you flip them up on their bums. And they kind of look at you like, "Do you really have to do this?" We get a professional in, the Metheralls. They're really, really good. They're down to about 1.5 to 2 minutes per animal, so it's not a long time. And by the time they're done shearing it, and this is done in late spring, so it's getting warm out, they don't want to wear these snowsuits, so to speak.
I bet.
We turn them loose out in the pen when they're done, and within 20 minutes, they are running around frisky as kittens. You know, really? They're bouncing and hopping around. They feel great. You know, it's coming into June and someone just took the snowsuit off.
Yeah, well, I can attest to that. I mean, after I shave after months and months of having it too, whether it's January 1st or, you know, June. Yeah, absolutely. I can attest to that. That's interesting because I've heard that over the past, you know, people say, you know, it's torture or it's suffering for them. But like you said, I mean, they're getting a haircut. And then, like you said as well, they're jumping around. They wouldn't be doing that if they weren't happy. You know,
yeah, exactly.
And it's going to be warm out there and you're doing them a favor. And I can imagine, like other things compared to in nature, when you shear in nature, right, it's probably even more ugly. It's probably bloody.
There's two kinds of, there's two ways that sheep grow their fur, the wool. The other kinds of sheep, you don't see them very often in Canada, it's called a hair sheep. Okay. Hair sheep, they grow what looks like wool, but they self-shed. And these guys look dreadful when they're in the late spring because it looks like someone took a machete and hacked chunks out of them, okay? They're like coming off in patches. In fact, if you get a chance to watch some good nature videos, you'll see the bison, like the great big American ruminant animals, okay, they do the same thing in springtime. Big chunks of their coats come off, and in the middle of that, it looked dreadful. You know, it looks like someone came along and just took chunks out of them with a machete. It takes them a while to do it. They find trees, they roll on the ground, they rub on rocks, they'll rub on you'll see some of these ruminant animals, like cattle will do it, and bison will do it as well. They'll get together with other ones they trust, and they'll use their horns and they'll scratch each other.
Wow.
It's really amazing to watch. I've even got pictures of my cow when they do this, and one cow will stand there. Somehow they just do it through silent communication. I can't even tell. They'll put their neck up, and the other cow will take the horn and just gently scratch up the side of the head and the neck and get all the spots that cow can't scratch. And then you watch this for about 10 minutes, and then the one cow will stop and put their head up, and then the other cow will do it back.
Jeez, that's amazing. So
animals, way of looking at, they groom is what I'm saying. You know, and it happens in nature. And in this case, like that's just one example. We're going back to a propaganda misinformation campaign getting out there, right? And this whole thing with wool, and that's what it just really drove me nuts because there's just no truth in it at all. In fact, you need to shear sheep.
Yeah.
I've seen what happened before on other farms when a sheep hasn't been sheared, and it gets ugly. They get lice, they get fecal matter buildup, they end up bleeding, and In some cases, they can get so heavy that when they're wet, they lay down and they roll over on their side. They can get too heavy and they can stay stuck on their sides and die.
Jeez. Oh my God. Like a turtle on their back, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wow. So then, just to recap again, you shear once a year, every spring, or
we do it once a year, and we do
okay,
it in the spring.
spring,
Okay.
late spring.
Some farmers will do it maybe twice a year.
Okay.
We prefer not to do that because we let them shag out because they don't grow the wool fast, especially in the summertime.
Okay.
By about late August, early September, you'll notice they're getting a little thicker. And by the time it's starting to get noticeably thick in October, well, you live in Ontario too. You know what October is getting like. So,
They need it.
now they're putting on sweaters. And then by the time Christmas rolled around, well, that sweater has grown itself into a full on snowsuit. And they're pretty thankful for it.
Mm.
And now I'll make some interesting observations. Like my sheep have 24/7 access inside of a barn and outside as well in the winter pen. And you watch, and unless it's like a really strong wind, okay, if it's really cold out, most of the times they will be outdoors just relaxing when they're done chewing food. They'll be sitting down in the snow and the straw, and they'll just be relaxing. They got that nice thick coat on, and they can handle the weather like a champ.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when I was at your farm, was it a month ago, maybe or so? It,
Yeah, it's just before
it-
Christmas.
yeah, and it was fairly cold for a December afternoon, and I'm a northern boy, so I should be used to it, but I still hate it. It was fairly cold, and they were all outside. We walked
Oh,
inside, and they followed us in, or after, they followed you in a little bit just to be nosy, probably, but they
yeah,
did not need to be inside at all. And I was shivering, and I'm a 220-pound guy, so
yeah.
and I had a big coat on and boots, so yeah, they didn't seem to mind it at all. And I could just imagine on those windy days, sure, then they'll take cover, like you or I would, right?
And that's where well, actually, so anyways, before we get too carried away with
Yeah.
that, we got a couple of different things we can start off with, because I got to thinking about that list you'd sent off with.
Sure.
Where'd you want to start with? Because I figured kind of if your viewers or your listeners, if they remember, I talked a little bit last time kind of about how things evolved to where we are now.
Yep.
I was kind of start with a little bit of a history on the sort of ruminants, herbivores in general, and the human development. Okay.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I wanted to touch on as well. I'm really interested in that, so please go ahead.
All right. So when we start with, there are many different resources on this. Okay. Because I know one of the things people do when they don't want to believe this or they want to challenge me on this is they throw it in my face, citations or proof or whatever.
Yep.
Okay? I got to be honest with you. I do have a bit of a collection of accumulated, but it is long. Okay. I'll throw out some names of actual people that have done like a ton of the actual nitty gritty, dirty research and got right down into the books and everything.
Okay.
All right. So when we start with, I want to take a little side note here, and I'll talk about paleontology. I really like paleontology, and it's one of the pure sciences out there. And this is my own theory and I listened to a paleontologist on this. Why would I say it's a pure science? Because there's no money in it. There's no corporation out there cares what dinosaurs did, when woolly mammoths came about, when did man first pick up a rock and start hacking apart things. There's no money involved in that. And so when you take the money out, you're really getting down to what I like to call that pure neutral science. What did happen? And I think one of the things about paleontology that's just absolutely amazing, I compare it to remember the show CSI,
Yes.
Crime Forensics? Paleontology, when you really look at it, it is ultimate forensics in action. They find footprints from dinosaurs, like the roaring T-Rex kind, going back 65 million years ago. Okay, That's some pretty good work there to be finding footprints or skin impressions and stuff like that from animals dead 65 million years ago. You know,
Sure.
I can't even find where my cattle left their, when they scratch on a tree out in the yard, in the pastures. I can't even find where they left their fur, let alone going back 65 million years. So with that, that's kind of where I want to talk about that leading into this, because I have a lot of like just amazing things that I've just been blown away with paleontology, anthropology, you know, the development of humans to get us where we are today, because it's very, very amazing stuff. So first thing we look at, all right, when we're talking about with the main thing I raise, ruminants, okay, just to review, ruminants are the four-chambered stomach herbivores, and we're talking cattle, sheep, goats, bison, moose, caribou, wildebeest. All right, they're pretty much around the world naturally, except for the Antarctic and Australia. But Australia had its own grazing herbivores that digested plant matter in other ways. They still got things like kangaroos and wombats. And they once had a giant wombat that got killed off about 40,000 years ago, if I remember correctly. Wow. The giant wombat was the size of a rhinoceros, right? So now there are other herbivores out there that are not ruminants, okay? And that would be horses, rhinoceroses, elephants, okay? And then if we go into prehistory, there's even a lot more. Okay. Those animals are what we call monogastric, and the similarities between them is that one way or another, there's only one way you digest plant matter, okay, when you don't have laboratory equipment, and that is you have to ferment it. So the ruminants, they ferment first, okay? The live bacteria cultures in the rumen are breaking down the cellulose. Cellulose is the structural carbohydrates. That's the stuff we can't digest. You know, when you eat lettuce and you poop it out, okay, that's the cellulose coming out of you. Okay, so and we call it structural carbohydrates. You can get really strong, like tree bark, okay, or tree wood. That's made of carbohydrates. Okay, and you get really soft stuff like what's in lettuce. You know, even we can chew that. We don't necessarily get anything from it, but so ruminants will break down these plant matters, okay, and they're breaking down sugars, cellulose, and they're breaking down protein, okay, and that's what they're doing in the rumen to make it into food. The monogastric herbivores, horses, rhinoceroses, elephants, and just three quick examples right there. What they do, they digest it first in an acid stomach like we do, and then where we have this little tiny pinky finger size appendix or a cecum, those animals have a huge, like monstrously large appendix or a cecum, okay, and that's where they do their fermentation. And then we got certain animals that actually have to go twice, rabbits. So when rabbits eat the food first time and it goes to their cecum, it ferments right down, and then they pass it out the first time, it's a cecum pellet. So, all right, same end. So they pick it all up, put her back down the yap, and they eat it again. Now, let's take a side note on that. Vegans, stop comparing us to gorillas, because gorillas have a large cecum, and they do eat a lot of their poop.
Yep.
Once. So we don't have that ability. You can put
that's how they get
plant food in
B12,
your mouth,
I believe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you put pure plant food in your mouth and you try to eat it after it comes out of you, which every doctor in the world will tell you don't do it. Okay, and there's a reason for that. We will get very, very sick. All right, so there's one example of just how we're not truly or in any way a herbivore. So now going back to what we're talking about with the ruminants, what makes them different? Okay, I would say the majority of ruminants come in some kind of herding. Okay, you got small ones like muskox. I'm sure you've heard of muskox, big old shaggy things way up in the Canadian tundra. probably the most northern ruminants, them or caribou that are in existence. And they're ruminants, okay? But they move in very small groups, 20, 30. And then you get right on down to the super large ones, like we got bison, okay, cattle. The ancient cattle that were wiped out, the wild aurochs, which the last one was killed 400 years ago. All right, they were massive. They were almost 7 feet tall, okay, and they were extremely dangerous and aggressive.
Wow.
All right, Julius Caesar used to talk about these things being like the quarter the size of an elephant and just extremely dangerous to hunt. All right, so anyways, with these ruminants, they move in herds, and if you look at like bison, wildebeest, they're in the massive herds, okay, like hundreds, thousands, okay. So, and we'll cover later why the herding behavior exists. Now, tie this into our the evolution of things. Going back to the days when the Jurassic Park dinosaurs were hanging out and kind of dominating the earth, T-Rex was out there laying the smackdown on everything. Okay, well, there was no grass plants, right? So when you see recreation of dinosaur scenes that show grass, well, that's not accurate. There was no grass. Okay, there's lots of other plants, but grass hadn't existed. Early grass pollens started to come on the scene around 60 million years ago. Now this here is very, very interesting. I'm going to drop another name for you. There's a guy named Dr. Peter Ballerstedt. He is by profession the forage producer for Barenbrug, and he's also a huge promoter of the high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet. And, Dr. Peter Ballerstedt, if you get a chance to watch his stuff on YouTube for your listeners, very, very educational. He goes into much more detail about how all these histories tie together. So to go back to it, the early grass plant pollens started appearing about 65 million years ago. I think it was approximately 50 to 40 million years ago. There was the first grass plants came on the scene. And again, I want to get people's heads straight on grass, okay? Don't go into the suburban neighborhood and have, Joe and John Smith stick their head out the door and look at that neat, tidy little lawn with 2-inch grass. Okay, that's not what we're talking about. That's grass species, absolutely, but that's not what grass. That's not how grass really actually ends up turning out typically. Okay, grass. We're talking about a whole large family of plants: sugarcane, millets, oats, bluegrasses. Okay, you got creeping red fescues, oodles and oodles of plants out there, and they're growing 2 different ways. There's rhizomas or runners, okay, and these are ones that literally, as they grow, they'll extend new roots horizontally sideways and set up new shoots. So you can literally, like your lawn grasses, Kentucky bluegrass and creeping red fescue are 2 common ones, okay. You could put them down, look after them well, and they will spread themselves, even if you don't let them go to seed. Then there's other grasses where what they need to do, okay, they grow what we call bunches. There'll be a seed or 2 going down, and they'll put up a couple of stems and a whole bunch of leaves with each stem. And those will only reproduce, okay, if the seeds are allowed to drop. Okay, and then as they spread around, they drop their seed. They'll create more themselves. Okay, I can't say this is always the way it is, but generally with the bunch grasses, they're usually taller, very, very. Oh man, it's hard to describe this. I want to say bushy, but when people see even the smaller grasses we have on our farm, and they're like, "Oh wow, that's bushy," I'm like, "Oh, that's nothing." So, for example, what are we talking about here? We'll look at, give you one species of grass we grow really well. It's called reed canary grass. It loves to grow in wetland areas. It will grow other places, but this is like when it's in full seed head, it'll be 6 to 7 feet tall.
Wow.
So that's what we're talking about with grasses, right? Then going back, and I dropped the names of other types of grass, like sugarcane. A lot of people probably don't realize that sugarcane is a grass. Okay, it's a tropical, very, very tropical grass. and it can grow up to 20 feet tall. So, you know, when people are wondering how can grass possibly pull down that much carbon out of the atmosphere, well, look at the size of some of these plants when you let them get there, and then you can figure out it's not just trees that pull carbon out of the atmosphere.
Sure.
So we got grasses came on the scene.
So if I can
Uh,
interrupt you just for a second, so is wheat a grass then? Is corn a grass? I mean, technically, or no?
yes, corn is a grass. It is
Okay.
made from it was engineered old-fashioned by the Aztecs, okay, and the Mayans. It was you can still find this grass. It's called teosinte.
Wow.
Okay, it's a very tropical grass in Central America. And when you look at it, the seed looks like it's thick, dense seed. And they actually, I saw a video demonstration of a guy at the University of Arizona, I think it was. And he showed how in 3 or 4 generations with selective backbreeding with the grass plants, because you got to remember, you know, prior to just like 20, 30 years ago, there was no like laboratory genetic modification. It was all selective breeding, even with plants. So teosinte, they showed how in just 2 or 3 generations you get the maize, like a small a grass plant with a small little corn cob on it.
Wow.
And it was amazing to watch this university student demonstrate how the Aztecs did it. And so from there, you get to appreciate that, okay, wow. Wheat, rye, triticale, barley. Okay, those are all what we call cereal grains, but they are annual grasses. Okay, and just to go back to get our readers more up to speed, annual grasses or any annual plant is a plant that comes on once. It sprouts up once, and then it grows up rapidly, aggressively, produces a seed head, then it dies. A perennial, okay, and trees are classic perennials. You know, they live year after year after year. Okay. Perennial grasses, and for people who want to know, like your lawn grasses, right, are examples of usually perennial grasses. They're there 2, 3, 5, 6 years. Okay, I don't know of too many grass plants that grow much on 6 or 7 years. I'd have to talk to a forage agronomist to find out if there is. So, both annuals and perennials have their place in nature. Okay, and we can cover a little bit about how that works. And they, so yeah, talking about just what you're asking about there. So wheat is a grass, okay. And it's funny because I just did a video today where what I did is I took a whole pile of perennial grass seed. Okay, it was orchard grass seed that was fallen out of a hay bale. It was just it was older hay, so all the grass seed had fallen out in a big chunk. And I scooped up a handful of it, and I did a video, and I'll be putting it up on Facebook soon. And I'm like, yeah. Here we go. Here I am. I'm going to grain feed my cows because really it's calorie dense. It offers very similar energy properties and protein properties to the cow. Okay, and you know I put down that perennial grass seed. It's very tiny. Okay, that's the one thing you'll find with perennials. They're very small seeds. Whereas, like, you know, if you ever seen the grains, you've seen corn. Okay, when you open up a can of corn, that's grass seed right there, very large grass seed.
Right.
Okay, but same with wheat, barley, and all that stuff. It's grass seed. You know, until you monkey around with it, grind it up or whatever. So.
Okay, sorry, I'll take you back then.
We'll keep the history of grass. So several million years, I think about 5-10 million years. I'm not exactly too sure. Okay, remember these timelines, we don't have exact dates. After grass first appeared, the first ruminants evolved, okay? And when you look at logically how that happens, because the ruminants, I would say, are probably, of all the herbivorous mammals out there, the ruminants are the most efficient plant digesters, okay? So you got these ruminants that come onto the scene, and I believe it was as time evolved, all the classes of ruminants that we have now, okay, had pretty much come about as recently as 20 to 50 million years ago. Okay, this is just going off the top of my head, okay? And when I say classes, okay, that when we take the ruminants, you got the deer, okay, you've got the bovine. The bovines, for example, nowadays would consist bison, cattle, yak. Okay, I don't know if people may not realize a yak is not a cow. They're very closely related, but not quite. And then there is one other animal in there. I just can't remember what it is. Okay, and then you got the sheep and goat family. Okay, and that, by the way, is the family that also contains the muskox. And I believe there is another family of ruminants. I might be forgetting exactly their main group title of what they're called. But you see, they kind of break down in their different groups, right? You know, sheep and goat family with, as far as I know, the muskox being the largest of all of them. But for the most part, they're much smaller animals, right? And then you got like the huge ones. If we look at bison, if we look at the something that just like lived right here in Canada, not Ontario, but out Western Canada, you got the ancient bison as well as the long-haired bison, or the long-horned bison, pardon me. These things were like, you take the normal size 1,800, 2,000 pound size bison of today, and I use those weights for wild bison, not domesticated bison, which are feedlot fed and up over 3,000 pounds. Wow. Now you take those, you take that 1,800 pound wild bison that we have now, okay, and imagine that thing being about 30-40% larger. Okay, and standing probably well over 7 feet tall. And the native North American forefathers were hunting these things, okay, as well as woolly mammoths. So it just gives you an idea, like they were some pretty big animals out there.
Absolutely, and before guns, maybe note.
Yeah,
before guns, they hunted them. That's crazy.
For sure. You know, the guy out there with the spear, and you know, at the best
Arrow.
tool he had was a spear and an atlatl.
Yeah.
An atlatl is it's a small wooden or bone device, and all it does is you set spear in it, allows you to use leverage and throw the spear further and harder.
It's amazing.
It's really interesting if you get a paleontologist show you how it worked.
So for all of those, the ruminants, continue, please. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. So
no problem.
When we come up to closer to modern times, we went through several ice ages in the last couple 100,000 years or so. And this really ties into things because there's a lot of research going on in this. I'm not going to say anything is for sure, but when we're winding down the last ice age, the world had a lot of grasslands. Okay, and if you want to imagine going back that 10 to 15,000 years ago, what North America pretty much mostly looked like. That time here in Ontario, we're still pretty much under ice, but southern Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba is free of ice. Thick, dense grass fields. You've got woolly mammoths, okay, a lot larger than elephants, hanging out on the prairies. They're accompanied by these massive bison. There'll be animals like the shrub ox, and they're being hunted by the dire wolf. Okay, dire wolves are like about the same size as modern day wolves, with just really large, powerful jaws on them. Okay, and you also had saber-toothed cat, not saber-toothed tiger. You know, great big vicious canines. And to this day, paleontologists can't answer for sure if it was a hunter or scavenger. Okay, but those, you know, you wouldn't want to be encountering those. Then you got one of my favorites, you know, the giant short-faced bear, which they're pretty sure was a scavenger. But just imagine this massive, massive bear, way bigger than a grizzly. They know from studying its fossils and its hairs and stuff like that, that it was a hyper carnivore. It had a very, very large meat diet. Okay, like, you know, when you look at grizzly and black bears, they are omnivorous animals. Okay, but it's not even. You know, they will take calories from meat and fat given the option.
For sure.
Rather, that's the scene of what you got North America. And the truth is, it pretty much was the same in Siberia and Europe. The only thing that changes is as man evolved, there was different disappearances of what we call about, I think it was 40 to 50% of the animal species. In Europe, the woolly mammoth died out sooner, along with the several species of woolly rhinoceroses. Okay, another vicious animal people realize lived almost the whole world over, lions. Okay, lions right now are in Africa, and a little bit of a population called the Asiatic lion in India. Okay, and this very small population. But lions once lived all across Siberia, all over Europe, all through the North America. Okay, and the North American lion you know, they're massive animals, 30-40% larger than its African counterparts, only they were living through snow and, you know, all the nasty weather there. And people lived in this environment. And our weapon, our most important weapon was our brain. Okay. So side by side. Oh, so talking about grass, how does grass come into all this? So grass, as I said in the last podcast, I like to think of it as the skin of the earth, okay? It grows fast, grows quickly, pulls down a lot of nutrients into the soil, and it'll go dormant for either, if you're in tropical areas, it goes dormant for the really hot periods of the year, or if you're in northern environments, it goes dormant for the winter freezing periods. So grass, unlike trees can shed their leaves, go dormant, and then in the new season, grow new leaves. Grass cannot do that. Grass was evolved to be beaten down, eaten, and recycled. So that's where you're herding the animals, and especially the ruminants, right? You've got those hundreds, thousands of animals all packed together, and they're eating grass. Now, hanging out with grass, you're going to get your clovers, your alfalfas, you're going to get all those weeds, okay? It's not just one species of plant. You'll easily probably looking at anywhere you go on any prairie, steppe, or sort of open area like that in the world, you'll find, I would say, 20 to 50 species of plants all living together. So it is a biodiverse environment. So you got these animals out there munching down, eating the leaves, doing their thing. Herding behavior is a defense mechanism, okay? The safety is in numbers, and that's how the herd works, whether it's a flock of sheep, a herd of bison, okay, a giant herd of wildebeest. Stay together, your odds of survival are better. But in doing so, okay, you just imagine this, you're peeing, you're defecating, okay, you're making a real mess, you've eaten your food. And they rarely do, these animals, when given the chance to live on their own, rarely will they eat grass right down to the nub, okay? So they've soiled their immediate area. Well, this is why they must keep moving. Controlling the numbers, that's where the wolves, the lions, okay, the pack hunting animals, that's where they come in. They take the weakest out, kill them, eat, and the rest move on and survive. And then of course when you got the primary carnivores hunting out the weak ones, leave behind a bunch of stuff. The scavengers, the vultures, bears, other things come along, eat the carcass of what's left of the carcasses, and then it's down to bacteria and bugs. Okay, and anywhere you look on a grassland ecosystem, or you're going to have tons of insects, and you're going to have life above the ground and below the ground. And I'm not just talking about the worms or the microbes. You're going to have like field mice. You're going to have prairie dogs. You're going to have different rodent animals, even some bird species that will burrow into the ground. There's lots of birds as well that live out in grasslands. They rely, you look at the bobolink as an example, or the brown-headed cowbird lives entirely in grass. They don't live in treed areas. So the whole functioning ecosystem, when people think grass, you got to stop thinking of a golf course or a lawn. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's man-made. Like when I see someone with that perfectly manicured lawn, which to me looks horrible, it's just like all that is a green carpet on your front, space of your house. That's all it is.
It does. Seems like a waste of money to me as well. But I do want to just unpack one thing, Rick, if I can. So you mentioned the fact that the grasses, or the animals evolved, from the grass, or rather the grasses evolved with the animals eating them. I think a lot of people would say, and have said in the past, well, if they just stopped eating, if we stopped having cattle, we stopped having grazing animals, it would be okay, and the grass would go and they'd be happy. But what you've actually mentioned was that if the animals aren't there to eat the grass and trim the grass, it actually will then degrade the land even more, right? It'll turn into a barren wasteland eventually, won't it? From what I've learned from on Savory and all of them, is that if you don't have these ruminant animals, if you can please explain it, what happens to that land if that grass then grows, doesn't get trimmed, and then dies, and there's what happens?
Okay. So you look at the two different environments. that Alan Savory has come up with. Oh, I got a message saying internet connection is unstable. So if I disappear on you, I haven't gone
Okay.
anywhere.
Okay, I think you're okay for now. Yeah.
Alan Savory has created something called a brittleness scale. Okay, and this, for the most part, it's talking about your moisture in your environment. Okay, a extremely non-brittle environment would be like the Amazon rainforest. Okay, which funny, rainforest, you don't have very much grass growing there. Which, well, that's that ecosystem. Okay. And then you've got the other extreme, the Canadian prairie, the Siberian steppe, the African savanna, and you're talking about like much more wider open spaces. Okay, less rainfall, and these areas typically have a lot more grass. And what we call those, usually they're more brittle environments. Brittle, with this, basically one way of putting it is if you let the grass just go. Okay, it's dry for, it could be dry for 6 months of the year. It's predominantly a dry environment. Things don't biologically break down as efficiently. And to give you an example, so here in Ontario, we're leaning towards the non-brittle side due to our high moisture content. When Ontario summer goes like 6 or 8 weeks without rain, and my fellow farmers are panicking and they go drought, I'm like, that's not a drought, boys.
Yeah.
Talk to the guys in Alberta. But sooner or later, there's going to be rain coming along, and then we also, of course, have the added benefit of snow. Okay, and snow changes the game a bit because snow weights down, it crushes the grass onto the ground. Not as efficiently as ruminants, but it helps to recycle the grass, albeit slowly, so that the microbes can sort of kill off the leaves, and next spring it can start over again. But you still will have erosion damage, not as bad as the dry land environments. Now we go to the dry land environments, and let's use the United States and northern Mexico. This is a perfect example. A lot of people think about, oh, look at all this, natural desert. Well, it wasn't natural desert. It was a dry, arid grassland that once was flourishing with animals and grass species. When you don't have the animals recycling, chewing down the grass, bringing it back onto the ground, okay, the grasses grow up, they produce their babies, their seeds, and then they wait. And of course, nothing happens. So if you don't stimulate it, okay, let's use an example for what grass needs is a workout. You go to the gym or you go to the martial arts, you train, your muscles get sore, your body says, okay, got to adapt to this, get stronger, get faster, get able to function longer. Well, if you don't stimulate grass, especially in a dry land environment, it'll produce less of itself. There's something called oxidization, where literally there's parts in Arizona where grass is sitting there. They got grass stems that are just dried up. And I think they estimated that some of these plants are 20, 30 years old.
Wow.
And then let's use that little western interior of the United States as a perfect example. Look at the fire problems they have there, okay? You've got old, carbon-rich, stale grass, shrub plants, things just sitting there. It just becomes like you just need one lightning strike. There you go.
Yeah.
Right? It's not green. It's not vegetative. You look at the ground, the spacing between the plants gets further and further apart, and that's what Alan Savory talks about. Okay, and it's extremely important. Now, to get an idea of what people have to understand, we take all these places like in California, where they in Arizona, where they had these massive fires. Okay, we're gonna go back a couple hundred years ago in the history when bison, okay, mountain goats, all these different. There's what the heck are they called? The pronghorn antelope. There's another herding animal right there, right? Yeah. Elk, another animal that lives out in these in the western. Elk once lived all across North America, but so put all these herding animals back out there. They chew up the grass, right? They'll eat about half the plant. And inside that, in the driest of times, with the, you take the ruminant, they're putting all that material in their gut where there's moisture, there's bacteria. Now we're getting good rapid biological breakdown, and then they pass it out. Then the soil's going to benefit. Okay, soil's going to benefit because you've got moisture in that. Like, you'd be surprised when you've got like, you're taking that bison, you got that 1,800-pound bison. Okay, it's going to poop about 50 to 100 pounds a day. Okay, rich with moisture.
That's fertilizer, right?
So you're adding a little moisture. You're feeding the soil microbes. Okay, you're adding organic matter to the soil. Grass. If and I'll have to get you up here this summer to show you. And I got lots of pictures of this. When you get the cows or the sheep or the goats, and they eat the grass down to about that halfway point, and they're leaving their dung behind. Okay, you come back and watch, and it's amazing because the grass will just come right back up through that like a champ.
Wow.
All right, and that's because the microbes are making or breaking down the fecal matter, and they're turning it into something very usable for the soil. And like, an amazing thing I sometimes love to do is every day when my cattle are on pasture, I'm going through with a stick and I'm pulling apart manure. I like to see what's going on. You see the dung beetle colonies. You'll see there's a very specific fly to ruminant manure. Okay, and they'll be populating. You'll see other bugs, and if you wait 2 or 3 weeks, you open up these cattle pies, if they're still there, because in the spring, within about 20 days, the cow pies are gone. All right, nature just breaks them down, but you'll find like whole populations of earthworms and stuff. Okay,
wow,
a lot of life going on there. So you multiply this by thousands in these grassland environments, especially the dry areas. You're going to keep the ground moist. You're going to feed other animals like the microbial ones, as well as other like birds. Okay, the brown-headed cowbird is going through, pulling apart bison poop, cow poop, and it's looking for the bugs in there. It's looking for the dung beetles. It lives off of those things. Yeah. So there is a whole functioning ecosystem, and this has been going on for close to, I think, 40, 50 million years with the grassland environment. And that's why people have to understand and respect grassland. Mm-hmm. Now the non-brittle environment, so where we are here in Ontario, okay, it's kind of funny how we go, because we can go one of two ways. Ontario, people think, oh, it's not really naturally a grassland environment. Well, there's never really a pure one or the other environment. Ontario is, when you look at what it originally was, it is a lot of woodland, but it was also still meadows, which are just small grasslands. And when people think of meadows, I think they always think of, like just a small little clearing. Well, let's put the elk population back in. The eastern elk population wiped out about 200-300 years ago. Put them back here in Ontario, okay? And it was nothing to have large clearings everywhere across Ontario where these elk, these grazing elk herds would move through. I use the elk as an example because it was here in Ontario, but elk amongst the deer species is one of the herding ruminants, okay? We take a moose. A moose is not a herding animal, okay? You lived up in the Sioux, I believe.
Yes.
You've probably seen moose.
I have.
You always see them by themselves.
It's true.
And the solo or the small group ruminants, they have a role to play too, Mooses will keep, from what I understand, mooses will keep forests from overgrowing, okay?
Oh, okay.
A lot of people think, oh, just forests the whole world over. They don't understand. Like, you look at what's going on in some parts of the world. Carlo, let's just take you back up to northern Ontario.
Yep.
You could probably think of a spot going from here to your home in Sault Ste. Marie. You could probably think of spots where there's trees dying. There's a whole lot of just dead trees. Okay.
Yep.
Well, dead trees don't do any good. All right. It's carbon that's slowly breaking down, going in the atmosphere. Lightning hits it or something happens, and kavoosh. There we are. We're having a fire problem of our own. Thank God it wouldn't most likely wouldn't be on the scale of Australia or California, but that's just it. Okay. all these ecosystems, when man tries to get involved and interfere with them, they have to understand forest grasslands mix and grasslands. Okay, there's animals and everything has its place that has a job to do. So kind of painted the picture of how most of the world was for the longest time. Now you take this is going into anthropology. You take some primates that used to hang out in the trees, and for some reason we got it in our heads to start wandering into the grasslands. Okay, now this didn't happen overnight, but when people look at orangutans, chimpanzees, and wonder why they can still move a lot on all fours, and we have really evolved to walk on hind legs. Think back to that 6-7 feet tall grass. Well, you spend a couple 100,000 years wandering through the grasslands, you're going to learn to stand upright to look for the danger, for the food. All right, I talked about paleontology. Well, they know that at some point, and I don't remember that, about 2.5 million, 3 million years ago, you got these primates that started going for easy calories, dead animals. Okay, we did originally scavenge. Okay, because we didn't really have the ability to bring down a mammoth or something like that, but it's known that we started scavenging. Somewhere along the way, we learned to take a rock and break open. This is really cool. Dr. Peter Ballerstedt shows a picture of this. It is it's a thigh bone of a ruminant animal broken open that fossilized from over 2 million years ago. And they could tell the marrow is fossilized inside. And there's a big saying about, or an understanding, that the first thing we went for was the most nutrient dense parts of the animal, which would be the organs, the fat, and the bone marrow, especially bone marrow. From what I understand, Carlo, you've enjoyed your share of ossobuco.
I have. Thank you so much. I was going to mention that as well. Perfect timing. You're right, though. I mean, everything I've learned as well. What's that, sorry?
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, tell me who doesn't enjoy popping out the center of the ossobuco, the shank, and nibbling down natural, it tastes like butter almost.
Yeah, absolutely. It tastes just like butter, and it's so delicious. I mean, and the organs, everything I learned about, ancient peoples, the organs, the fat, the bone marrow, the brain, once they, can access the brain, this was all what I think we were probably going to get into, but I think this is what catapulted us into being the people that we are, right? And being the species that we are. So yeah, continue, please.
Well, so yeah, we started off, of course, with the simpler tools, rocks, sticks, stones. Then we got somewhere along the way, we got creative and discovered fire. Okay, fire changes the game even further, because now you can take meat that's even further degraded, and we can still make it into something we can digest. Okay, it unlocks more nutrients. As Alan Savory says, this was a new tool that man got. When we first picked up a rock and started using it as a tool, that was the beginning of technology. All right, fire added another tool, another extension on what humans could do. From there, it only became, and of course, as this is going on over hundreds of thousands of years, our brains are the parts of our brains that are problem solving, they're developing better. We're developing even like all primates have verbal communication. Okay, it's when you really, so we started off with verbal communication naturally. Of course, as we developed those bigger brains, our verbal communication became far more complex, and we developed, but by the time we're getting down to, I'd say at least 1 million years ago, we're most of the way to where we are now. Very smart, very problem solving, good observation in terms of how to put, not observation with our eyes, but we could detect footprints, we could see fur, we figured out how to, you'll see some hunters still do this. They'll find animal dung and they'll put their hands in to see how warm it is, to know how far away the animal is. Okay, we developed all these tricks and traits. And there was we branched off a few different directions that I know from talking to people who've got degrees in anthropology. And let's use an example. Neanderthals, okay? People think we evolved from Neanderthals. We didn't. We co-evolved, okay? They, from what I understand, they got into Europe sooner. National Geographic years ago did a really wonderful recreation of a Neanderthal person, like an actual model. Neanderthals were shorter, very, very, very powerful, muscular, heavy built. And I think the theory goes was that Neanderthals had learned to be more ambush hunters, okay? Whereas what we were, humans, we were nomadic, okay? And that's why when you look at healthy beings, and I honestly think the most primal looking humans out there are basketball players, you know? Slender, longer legs, because longer legs are efficient for long distance walking, short distance sprints to bring down an animal, okay? And that's part of that nomadic thing. And, you know, you look at the basketball shoulders, they're lightly muscular, but basketball players can throw very, very, very well while throw the spear, right? You know, so you look at that's what I see as what probably our ancestors predominantly did look like and were built like. So, but there's a little bit of something that got a little funky here, okay, with this is going back, I think, about 50 to 30,000 years ago. Humans and Neanderthals had a good time together, okay, because most humans have a very, very small percentage of Neanderthal genetics in our DNA. All right, so there is a little bit of let's go see what the neighbors are up to.
Yeah, somebody jumped the fence.
Yeah. Now something, and I don't know, I've heard many different theories about it, but something happened. Neanderthals died out very suddenly. My personal theory I like to believe in is that it's just a failure to, like our being more nomadic. It's what made us more adaptable, more able to find new environments, okay? As you got ice ages coming and retreating, you know, if you can walk long distances and resettle, okay, that's definitely a strength. And I personally, that's my own belief. I may be wrong, okay, and I think that might be a big reason why humans survived and Neanderthals eventually died off. And just give you an idea of human settlement, Australian Aboriginals are like, they're amazing. You go back because they're the first people, as far as I understand, to come out of Africa. And they ended up in Australia 50,000 some odd years ago. That's a long distance of exploring, you know what I mean? And like any one of us before we got too carried away with technology, they very adaptive. They learn to adapt to their environment. I'm actually reading a book right now. I really recommend it. It's called Call of the Reed Warbler, and it's by Charles Massey down in Australia. And he's talking about the negative impact of cash cropping, industrial agriculture, monocultures, feedlots, and what it did to Australia versus how Australia was persisting for the longest time, because the land was being very much cared for by the Australian Aboriginals. And they made some mistakes, like all of us did at some points, but they didn't go overboard with it. So anyways, going back to humans and our very adaptive abilities, these brains that we developed on meat and fat. Okay, this is now whatever the theories are. To me, it all points to we really spent almost everything on meat and fat. Siri, give it a rest. Okay, sorry about that. Siri just interrupted me. So we got all this meat and fat. We got smarter. We got problem solving. We really adapted. And I'm going to take a few side steps here because I've heard some arguments. Vegans say, well, how come you need a tool to eat meat? It's like, unless you're going to stick your face in a stream, you need technology to drink water. You have to take a cup. Yeah. Okay. And let's go with that further. Let's see. We got otters will smash open clams with rocks. Okay. Chimpanzees use a stick to dig up termites. Yeah. There are other animals out there. There's I can't remember what type of bird it is, but some kind of bird that drops a rock on I think on an animal or something to break it open. Wow. So like using tools is not restricted to humans. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's actually a good point about the chimpanzees actually eating bugs. So they're clearly not vegan either.
Oh, chimpanzees will eat monkeys too. That's a
Yeah.
lot of people don't realize that. They actively hunt monkeys. Here's something actually, just a small segue. Just give you an idea. Chimpanzees are, from DNA studies, are pretty much our closest relative.
Mhm.
Funny enough that one thing chimpanzees will do, if you talk to the experts on them, is they will raid each other's tribes. Chimpanzees, they have their own gang warfare. They will go and kill each other.
Wow.
So, and the funniest thing is, we sometimes wonder, why are we so prone to violent? I mean, being violent, the good side, it helped us be hunters. Okay. If you watch those old National Geographic videos, the lion's not being cuddly when it takes down the zebra. It's sheer power, violence, and absolutely no mercy. Okay. We had to be that way to bring down these animals, but sadly enough, we've used that. Human beings one thing we do extremely well is we kill each other extremely well. Look at our military technology.
Yeah.
So, and then sad thing though, but it's probably got a reason to it. But when I find out that chimpanzees do this, and it's not just like they just go beat each other up. Like, I'd find out, like, you get two chimps that hold down one chimp from a neighboring tribe, and another chimp will jump on top of it and beat it till it caves its chest in. Wow. Or they'll rip off genitals and stuff like that. And it's just like stomach-turning violence.
Yeah.
So, like, one of the things I tell people, like especially vegans, stuff like that, I just tell them nature is beautiful, but nature is deadly. Mm-hmm. And we'll just throw something in there too, just about the way nature works. Some things like the herbivores get their licks in. Elephants kill all kinds of other creatures every year by accident and on purpose. Like, there was a Kenyan park ranger talking about this is like 15 years ago. An elephant had gone ballistic and it went over and it used its tusk and it punctured a rhinoceros and just did it again and again, killing the animal. And the park ranger could not figure out why the elephant behaved like that. You'll see the lions going after the Cape buffalo, one of the most dangerous animals on the planet in South Africa, and they don't always succeed. Sometimes that Cape buffalo is mauling a lion, breaking its neck and its ribs, crushing it down on the ground and getting its licks in. So like I said, nature's beautiful, but nature is deadly. There's a double side to it. It's two sides of the coin. So I think we just talked a lot about history, how the grass got here, how the animals got here, how we, of all the critters out there, are the ones that use computers, fly airplanes to decide what animals we're going to eat.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Let me ask you then, Rick. So taking what we've talked about, if I can kind of just switch gears just for a second, with the history of, where we came from, but also the history of the earth, of essentially, the ruminant animals being there, needing to be there for the grasses. How crazy do you think it is now? I mean, just to be devil's advocate, to think outside the box, how crazy do you think it is now when someone like me proposes the idea that I just eat meat? Like, is it a stretch for you to believe that I'm going to get all my nutrients, or is it common sense to you? Like, where does that sit with you? And has it changed over the years, or do you see, like, what's your take on that? Because we obviously, sorry, one more thing, because it seems like we obviously went through a period of time where we ate quite a bit of meat. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my sort of hobbyist enthusiasm on paleontology goes back to my childhood. Okay. And for the longest time, long before, when I was still in the military, and I used to love Discovery Channel and National Geographic. I used to love watching this stuff. But I used to think a lot on the Pleistocene, especially the late Pleistocene, which is where we're talking about the end of the last ice age.
Okay. And
I used to ask myself, where did these recent ancestors of ours, how did they eat? Like, I knew about the meat, but I remember, I can't remember what the book was, but I read a fictional book about mammoth hunters, and they're talking about putting these vegetables in with the mammoths when they eat them. I'm like, what? What vegetables did you cultivate? And I want to talk about that for a second, okay? Especially in the northern climates or even the tropical climates, let's talk about the food that's available before. We're not in our world today. Let's go back 20, 25,000 years ago. Okay. What is available to eat? Okay. And I can kind of go through that. All right. There's animals. Animals we can hunt and kill. Okay. Eggs. We can raid, if we know how to find the appropriate bird's nest, we can raid an egg. Okay. We can fish, which I kind of consider, fishing to me is just hunting from in the water.
Yeah.
Now, what plant matter can we eat? And people say, oh, you know, there's abundant fruit trees. Not really.
No.
Let's look at all the fruit-bearing trees. Okay, first off, going back to that time period before we started cultivating, you know, the selective breeding of we did that with trees too. You know, when you're talking, it's crab apples are native to North America. Apples are native to Europe, but they weren't like these big, lush apples. Okay, they're small, little, tiny things. All right. You got 2 weeks out of the year you can harvest apples for. You know, and you got to compete with the bugs and all the other critters that are going to live off those apples too. And that's just using apples as an example. All right, so we got 50 other weeks in the year to account for. All right, blueberries. Okay, something like blueberries, raspberries. Okay, it comes along in the summertime. Do you really think that we have all day long to sit there and harvest what really is going to amount to enough energy to get us through a quarter day on berries? And you got to compete with scavengers, bears, and things like that. So,
yeah.
And look at the labor output, right? Humans learn to be efficient. Okay, when you talk about like there would have been very, very few, the ancestors of lettuces. Okay, maybe, but even at that, like look at lettuces nowadays. You got to harvest lettuce at a certain stage, and as we know, we don't get much nutrients from it. A little bit of vitamin C, and other than that is just something to clean out the colon. All right, and not actually we'll get to that in a few minutes. We'll talk about, you know, broccoli and stuff like that. Well, broccoli, cabbage, those all evolved from wild mustard. Okay, the brassicas, and we can't eat wild mustard in any way, shape, or form. Trust me. Okay. We look at something like carrots. Well, you can see wild carrots nowadays. You got Queen Anne's lace is pretty much the closest thing. All right. And it grows in a lot of parts of Ontario. Just make sure if you're going to test this, make sure you're not ripping up hemlock out of the ground because it'll poison you. Okay. Like to the point that it could kill you. But Queen Anne's lace, a wild carrot, you pull it out and see if you can nibble on that root. Okay, you're gonna take about one bite and absolutely find it horrible. Okay, and as my my father-in-law likes to say, it's an old thing I guess from Italy. You know, all those root vegetables, you can't eat them raw. You got to cook them. You know, so again, you have to process them. All right, meat. I'll tell you this right now. I know Health Canada will, and all the health and safety organizations say, don't do this. I have eaten my own meat raw. My cousin, who's a chef, he made me do it. Okay. He's like, well, you got to understand, you can digest this. So he was making jerky and he was cutting up some roast. So he gave me a couple slabs of roast raw and I ate it. It was kind of tasty, a little bit chewy. And, but you know what? I didn't get sick. Nothing happened. Like nothing crazy happened anyways. So learned a lesson. I mean, not that I would recommend eat everything raw, but you know what I mean? Like, here's another example. Remember that movie Dances with Wolves? You ever see that?
Mm-hmm.
There's that scene where they rip out the fresh liver out of a dead bison, and it was like a celebration, and they all took a big bite out of the liver, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, they're going for meat and who knows, maybe a good source of sugar. You know, for those that don't know, the liver is the natural storage for blood glucose in any animal. So it's another reason why it's fairly highly prized by carnivores. You get a quick boost of energy.
So that's where it's glycogen, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to that ice age environment. And when I say ice age, the world's not frozen over. Okay. Get that idea out of your head. It was just, there's giant ice sheets up north and everywhere else had like more normal temperatures. Okay. Just each zone was a little bit different. So you can't really harvest any berries. You're not going to you got a limited time to harvest fruit. There's really no vegetables grown because potatoes hadn't been monkeyed with. Maize, corn, it would be thousands of years later, like I would say a couple thousand years ago, before the Aztecs, whatever got them to it, to start backbreeding and come up with corn. But interesting thing, I've also heard some theories that of all the North American indigenous peoples, the Aztecs were the ones that were starting to really show signs of societal failure. And they depended a lot on crop harvesting. So they lost that nomadic abilities. They were sacrificing humans because they couldn't understand crop failure. You know, and I remember reading stuff about ancient Egyptians. There was a thing I was watching where they talked about their poor dental health and their poor bone structure, because early Egyptians or ancient Egyptians were eating breads and stuff like that. You know, they're starting to get into food that they weren't designed to eat. So, yep.
Yeah. So then, I mean, it's funny. I guess the next segue would be, so, you know, I eat predominantly meat, right, in my diet. And now actually, because I am interested, or I'm at least concerned, or, you know, worry about certain things like vitamin C potentially or other nutrients. So I do eat quite a bit of liver. Me, luckily, I do like the liver. So I've gotten the liver from you guys. I love the liver. So, and I do, it's funny, like, I'm one of those guys, like other people, Dr. Sean Baker out there, a lot of people out there that are doing this carnivore thing. I've basically done it for over a year and a half now. I feel better than I've ever felt, right? And it's interesting when it comes to like the environment and things like that. You know, we were talking earlier about how much meat I eat, you know, maybe 300, 400, 500 pounds of meat a year rather. And you know, and the impact, you know, that, you know, on the resources and everything else. So it's interesting, like, you know, and then when you talk about wasting, right, there's not a lot of outside business. If I get my meat from you, it's my car driving to your house and that's it. You know what I mean? It's pretty simple. So what can you say on that, as far as like the simplest way, it's also the healthiest way in my mind. And it's so simple that sometimes it blows my mind that people don't see this. I don't know. What do you think about that?
We're talking about waste or just like food efficiency?
Yeah, everything. Like, I mean, maybe there's a bit of both sides of it, but I look at it like it's nutrient dense, right? So it's more efficient to even eat that way. And then as well, it's less overall waste as well, you know, even in the environment. So it's almost like a, you know, double-edged sword.
You kind of led into something that's a really modern phenomenon, okay? And I don't even think this was available to our parents. All right, it drives me nuts. You go to a grocery store like we're coming up to February, go to a grocery store, you can have whatever you want, fresh fruit and vegetable. It's all there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking outside at the 3 feet of snow on the ground, and I know it didn't come from Ontario.
Yep.
So that leads me to say, well, how did it get here? And then you see, you know, product of Mexico, Peru, Chile. So there's a whole lot of gas being used to get this stuff here. Mm-hmm. We already know, like, fossil fuels are not, like, we need to reduce fossil fuel usage. So growing tons and tons of plants around the globe and then shipping them around the globe isn't doing anybody any favors. Mm. Whereas meat, okay, take for where I am right here, okay? So we want to harvest meat, and I don't like to harvest in the wintertime because the cattle is not as fat, or the sheep's not as fat, okay? They're using their reserves. But if we had to, we could. Okay. You know, we have for our sake, all we have to do is load it up on in a vehicle, drive 5 minutes down to the abattoir, kill it. Mm-hmm. There you go. Yeah. You know, 3 feet of snow out of the ground, and we got food. Yeah. Doesn't matter that that's something so we're talking about food miles and everything that goes with that. Well, you know, where can you grow and where can you get meat? Like when we step back and say, okay, let's not put legalization or financial restrictions on abattoirs. Okay, mm-hmm. You could theoretically grow meat wherever you have animals. You know, wherever you can grow birds, mammals, etc. You can have meat. Okay, right there, you're taking out a huge part of the problem, which is shipping and driving these the food, all that fruit and vegetables. Okay, so let's go another step further there. So cereal grains. Okay, it's funny because I like cereal grains, as a plant that I grow for my animals to eat, okay? Because I will grow oats as a grass, and wheat as a grass, barley as a grass for my cattle and sheep to eat, especially in spots where the pasture is really weak and I need to pick up the nutrients. That's where the annuals come in. They provide what we call a cover crop. Okay. So that's where I really like the cereals. What I don't like cereals is being used as human food. If there's one thing I've come to realize in the last 5 years is that grain is just not, it's not an ideal, what do we make from grains? Well, we make breads, we make pastas, we make noodles, we make these cheap, efficient, cheap to efficient carbohydrate sources. But we don't, it's not at all natural because I've got oats sitting in the barn right now that are getting frost seeded out there. Okay. And I can give you a handful of oats and I could tell you, go ahead, Carlo, do what you want, try and eat them.
Yeah.
And the best luck you might have is you'd have to, use a tool and grind them up. But even then, you'll really find it hard to eat them. You would have to soak them, cook them, and keep modifying them. Right. And then, of course, you got all the other problems. We're talking about cleaning out the colon. Myself, I've done my own experimentation with carnivore. Lisa and I keep largely carnivore. We break carnivore for like Christmas time. We don't try to keep carnivore. We'll just be sociable. We eat whatever's put in front of us and whatever when guests come to our house. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, we keep largely carnivore. And the one thing I found amazing was that on an all-meat diet, I didn't have any problems pooping. Now, just a little warning for people out there listening. When I say an all-meat diet, that includes what you cook the meat in. All right, I feel it should be butter or animal fats. Yeah. Okay, stay away from vegetable oils or plant-based oils, please, because I think they are just as much part of the problem. Okay. Where were we talking about? We were talking about meat or cereal grains. Mm-hmm. So anybody I know that's eating like a lot of bread and stuff like that, and they seem to be the ones that first off get a very unhealthy physique to them. They end up with very sort of gross discoloration. And then I know from my own experiences when I was in the military and stuff like that, sometimes when you're out, the only thing you have available to eat is you got a couple slices of in your ration and you got some horribly preserved food. And try and eat that bread, and I swear to God, that is what slows down your colon and binds you up is the processed cereal grains right there. Yeah. Stop blaming the meat. Start looking at the other things that your ancestors never ate.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me as well, Rick, because to be quite honest, and I've even said this on the podcast a few times, but my digestion actually got fixed or resolved. My issues got resolved when I took out all the fiber. I took out almost all the plant matters. Now, for the odd time, I'll have some berries here and there, right? But really, that's it. And so with all those whole grains, hard, healthy whole grains removed, all those high, rich fibers, all the, even the green vegetables, all that fiber is removed. My digestion is better now. So it really throws everything upside down. But it makes sense, right? One of the things I heard is that, well, what do you need all that fiber to clean out if you don't have anything that's gunked up in there, right? If you're eating just meat, just real food, then you don't need the brush to clean out stuff. Maybe that's a theory, right?
Yep. Well, interesting enough, I did find, something I did find it actually seemed to help. The first time I transitioned on carnivore, and I didn't know if it was the meat or what, but I remember along with my energy intake, because I am extremely active, being that I do most of my farming by hand and I try not to use my tractor. And I found one of the tidbits was to use extra fat. So I remember rendering down pork fat and eating rendered down pork fat as well as using pork fat with all my meat to get that extra calories so I could have the energy. And it was, it also, I think it's a theory only. I think it actually also kept my digestive system lubricated, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, high fat, right? High saturated fat keeps everything going. It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
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 Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. Oh, yeah. Sorry. I want to talk about one of the things with grains, pulses, legumes. All right. and like the stuff we use for vegetable oil and stuff like that, soy, canola. When we talk about waste, if anybody saw the amount of work that goes into producing this stuff, it's unbelievable. Like massive, massive tractors, huge amounts of fossil fuels. And I fault the farmers that are doing it, because they've got to pay their bills. Okay, and they've been doing it for years. They believe in what they're doing. So, and you look at that, plus all the harvesting involved. And if you're not using animals to terminate these crops or the cover crops, you're really down to only being able to a few options. And then we start bringing chemicals into the mix, Roundup, atrazine, Liberty and stuff like that. You end up with these herbicides that you have to use. So now we're creating one problem, knocks onto another problem that knocks onto another problem. And before we forget, I've mentioned Dr. Peter Ballerstedt, and I believe Nicolette Hahn Nyman mentions this, okay? Look at the diabetes epic that's going on in North America, Canada, United States. Obesity is on the rise, diabetes on the rise. I think it's the World Health Organization's worried about how much insulin is going to be available for all the diabetics expected to be around by 2030. And Dr. Peter Ballerstedt hit it right on the head. He goes, why don't we start looking at the cost of what this stuff is? And he said, oh, wait, what if there was something that we could do to make sure people don't become diabetics? And of course, he's a proponent of the high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet.
Yeah, absolutely. It drives me nuts.
So yeah, because when we're talking about, again, this is looking at it from the big word holistic, knock-on effects, all these things we're doing, somewhere along the line, when we started harvesting grains, it's about the time that we started civilizations, and it's about the time that we started farming vice becoming hunter, small gather societies, okay? We stayed away from that and went into agriculture. And I think we can't, like the world population where it's at, where the ecosystems are at, and just people in general, we can't just all turn around, pick up spears and say, head for the hills.
For sure.
That ship sailed a long time ago. Ain't going to happen. Mm-hmm. The best, and this is part of our philosophy behind our farming, the best we can do is get our farms to create ecosystems on our farms, get our farms to behave as ecosystems are meant to, plants, animals, insects, soil, water, all functioning together.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask, excuse me, along with the meat production and, the animals that you have there, is that what is there, there's a role for crops in there, right? For some farmers, what role is there, is the role for crops in regenerative or rotating or however that works? My idea is that you're having a bunch of animals on your property. You're gonna have some pretty rich soil. You can probably grow some plants if you do want to grow some plants. I don't need any, but you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. There's I still see a place for crops. The first thing I would look at is I accept that the world population is not going to turn around and go carnivore, and I actually don't think we can feed them. Believe it or not, I think we don't have enough meat.
Not yet. Maybe.
Let's just if I wave a magic wand and the whole world gets smart, and we decide, okay, we're going to start cutting back our processed carbohydrates first, right? Well, that's just it. One way or another, I think for at least a long foreseeable future, there's still going to be some breads. There's still going to be, some pastas and stuff like that. I'm really hoping we see it reduced, and I think we need to reduce it severely. So that we would still need cropping for that, like especially when we're talking about that cash cropping, or it's the only way to describe it. But there's another thing to do with all these plants. And we talk about the mixed cocktail cover crops, and we're getting into Gabe Brown, Dale Brandt, Ray Archuleta. These guys, they are the wizards with this stuff. So with mixed cocktail cover crops, all we're doing is we're taking many different usually annual species, what you want to use, okay? and you can basically use them to bring life back to almost dead or dead soil. Okay. And they help build up soil. All right. But to really get the benefit out of this stuff, you have to use it. You really got to use it with livestock. Okay. Ideally ruminants, but you can also use, this is where some pigs and some chickens and turkeys would come into play as well. So with cover croppings, when we're talking our annuals, we look at our corn or cereal grains or millets. We look at our beans, our peas, okay? We look at sunflowers, and of course, a lot of these plants like peas, all the legumes, sunflowers, stuff like that, they're also beneficial to pollinators. So we can see the obvious benefit there. Yeah. Mix them together in their warm season or cool season type plants, cocktails, like nature would. When you're talking someone like Gabe Brown, he's got like these crazy like 20-way mixes and stuff like that. And I think it's beautiful when you look at these cover crops growing up and you just see all these different grain plants, which to the person who doesn't know any better, they could look at grains growing and they wouldn't be able to tell it apart from regular grass. And same with corn for most people. I've seen people drive past a field of corn in its early stages, like, oh, what kind of wheat are they growing? It's like, that's cool. Yeah. And they can't tell, but it just goes to show you it's grasses, right? Mm-hmm. So, but you got these things mixed together in a polyculture. And this matters because each one of these plants and each one of these types of plants has got a different shaped root. It's got different depths that its root reaches. They have different ways that they harvest, or they all harvest sunlight, but they'll cycle energy at different times of the year or different times. Their exudates, which is the stuff that the roots excrete into the soil, right? The extra sugar and stuff like that will be at different depths, okay? And there'll be different microbial life attracted to each plant, okay? And then, so when you got 20 different species in there, and each one of those species is probably carrying or supporting another 10 to 15 at least microbial species, well, now you're starting to get this broad, diverse polyculture going on. And that's where you can start to see where the soil health starts to get created. As these roots are pumping in the sugars into the ground, okay, and annuals do it quicker than perennials. Perennials do it too, okay, but annuals have to do it quickly because, if a human was the human equivalent of an annual would be like someone that was, raised up and they're like, oh, hey, doctor says you're going to die at age 22. So the guy's like, oh, man, I got to live life quickly. I got to live life to the fullest. Gets out there, works out, has a great life, gets on with his education, meets a lovely woman, says, hey, man, we got to have a baby, but we're only 18. Okay, sorry, got to have a baby now. So because every creature wants to reproduce. And then goes off and dies. So that's why an annual plant does that. It's got a short life. It's got to live life to its fullest. It's got to make a baby, and then done. Okay. So that's why with annuals, they're aggressive, okay? And so like some of your weeds, for example, and I can't remember exactly which ones are annuals, and that's why they grow aggressively. They just come on strong and hard. All right, it's their survival mechanism. So annuals are really good for building soil fast, okay? Perennials are good for building soil long-term and maintaining it. And you can grow the two of them together. Nature will do it. Yeah. Anyway, so that's where you can see the two uses for crops because, like I said, I think people are still going to be eating crops for a long time. Like I said, I hope to see it reduced. And we could still use the plants in our ecosystems. And just keep in mind, especially as herding ruminants, if you ever see like we'll take, for example, fall rye. I'll use fall rye in the spots where, come August or so, cows beat up a patch of pasture because, maybe the bulls were having a little bit of a tussle or whatever. Okay. And they chew up the ground a bit. I'm like, okay, thanks, guys. So I'll come out with a bag of fall rye and I'll sprinkle it everywhere. I'm a broadcaster, okay? I don't come out with a big heavy equipment and drill it into the ground. And then you come back, that's like, let's say late August, early September, and you come back in November, and I use fall rye as an example. It's green, lush, and growing, Okay,
Wow.
fall rise, one of the plants I like to talk about because this stuff will grow right up into Christmas time. You know, if there's no snow bearing it at Christmas time, like if you have a late winter, it'll grow and it'll overwinter. Okay, it can handle really nasty cold temperatures. In the spring, it'll be the first thing they picking up again. So in that case, there's another case of where an annual fits in. It's late fall feeding for the animals, like healthy feed, and early spring feeding while you're waiting for the perennials decide to get on with the show.
So, yeah, so I guess that maybe brings back to another question that I always kind of toss around, the old grass-fed versus grain-fed and everything like that. Then how do we do we muddy the water even more, or how do we actually differentiate between a grass-fed versus grain-fed? And then I guess the other question too is that, I mean, aside from the health question of whether does it matter or not, maybe you can touch on a little bit again on what is natural, and it seems like it's maybe even cyclical that it's natural, but
Yeah.
yeah.
First, I want to give everybody a bit of a background. Okay, when we're talking about grass feeding, grain feeding, we are talking about the ruminants, the sheep, cattle, goat, bison, like the animals that we farm. Okay, because the pigs are monogastrics, and you have to put them on a completely different diet. Same with poultry, different diet. So the ruminants, and I'll say cow, but when I say cow, you could supplement in the word sheep, goat, etc.
Okay.
So all cattle, all ruminants, they're first off, doesn't matter what model of production, most of them spend most of their lives on a grass diet. Okay. The difference might be is, and most farmers do this, was whether they're out on pasture eating it themselves, or if someone's filling up a feed bin or a hay ring with hay. Okay. Keep in mind, for those readers or listeners who don't know, hay is just cutting down pasture, drying it out, and then baling it up. That's all it is. Okay, it's just preserved grass and whatever grows with grass, weeds, legumes. So these animals, the ruminants, this is what they're mostly fed anyways. Okay, it's and some farmers will give a little bit of grain as a supplement to even their breeding stock. And I know many farmers that actually don't do that with the breeding stock, but for finishing animals that they're about to send off to a feedlot, they'll give them maybe a little bit of grain at the end. It helps them put weight on. Okay, and then there's when we talk about feedlot finished cattle. Okay, this is a big nasty image. Those animals, they're in their last couple weeks, couple months of their lives, and this is where. Depends on the operation. They're still going to get grass. They're still going to, usually in the form of hay or haylage, which is pickled grass. And they're going to get, most operations will give them grain combinations, okay? Now, to look at it this way. So grain, we're talking about concentrated annual grass seed. A small amount of it, in my opinion, it doesn't harm the animal because they will go out there, they'll naturally eat the seed anyways, okay? You can watch them anytime grass comes into seed, and if you use something like, let's take perennial ryegrass, okay? It's a perennial grass plant, produces a pretty big seed, and it looks almost like a grain, okay? And you watch the cows, they'll sit there and they'll eat the grain, or the seed growing there, okay? But they'll also eat some of the stem, and they'll eat the leaves. And when they do it on pasture, they do it in a very balanced proportion. So that seed makes up a small portion of the diet. It is energy rich, it's protein rich, it's got a little bit of fats. Okay, the plant fats are something that ruminants can't have too much of. They have to keep a very small amount of it. It's the one thing that can do them some harm. Slightly different topic we'll talk about another time though. Even though the cattle doesn't eat many plant fats, they after they ferment it in their stomach, they get a lot of fats out of that, fats and proteins. So it's really interesting. But
so it turns out they're on a high fat diet actually, right?
they are. There's Dr. Barry Groves, unfortunately passed away several years ago, but he talked about that the nutrients that all mammals need is the same. It's how they get those nutrients. Mm-hmm. And it's on a YouTube video called Homo Carnivorous by the late Dr. Barry Groves. I recommend for all the carnivore people out there, watch it. It's entertaining. very interesting to listen to and gives you some more info and understanding about how we came here as well.
Awesome.
So going back to cattle,
Yeah.
if you're putting a small amount of grain in their diet, it isn't a big deal. We talked about it when you're out here. Some of my hay is very what we call late cut, first cut hay. So what that means is it's very low in sugar. Okay, it's mostly just structural, the stiffer type cardboard-like carbohydrates. And I've given the cattle once in a while this winter. I've given them about maybe what amounts to about a half a pound to a pound of grain per cattle. Okay, when you're a 900-pound animal, that half a pound is. But it's like a little cherry on top of an ice cream. You know, it's not going to change. Eating a cherry on top of an ice cream sundae does not make you a fruit eater.
No.
So this would not be, by the industry definition, a grain feeding your animals. It's just a little extra energy that they could actually not get otherwise. And like I said, when I put up that video, big handful of orchard grass seed, and you get to watch Annabelle just dive right in there and clean it right up. So small amount of grain, in my mind, isn't going to hurt the animal. There's some very strict definitions though. People are on about, grass-fed, grass-finished. Well, all ruminants are grass-fed, like for the livestock farming ruminants. They're all grass-fed. It's what is added into their diets as well, because where it becomes different and how much of it gets added in. Grass finish, this is predominantly what we do here, except for those odd times in the wintertime when, like I said, when we have a bad time. Joel Saladin, Greg Judy, okay, the Tavelds down the road. And when they say grass-fed, grass-finish, and really they should say pasture-fed, pasture-finish, because clover, alfalfa, trefoil, that's not grass. Neither is dandelion, but it's the same idea. The animal goes out there, it's growing out of the ground or growing out of the tree. They pick what they want, they fill up on it, and they get fat on it. Some of the things, so people understand, when animals are left to just forage for themselves, okay, like you don't give them any supplemental grain at all. Grain, when you do add grain into their diet, and like the feedlots will add a considerably more significant amount, it's intense energy. It will put weight on fast. It will get them fat quickly. They'll add on extra fat. And I've heard many different conversations regarding the quality of that fat. I don't know enough at this point to really say if it's going to be okay to eat like that really high grain-fed fat or not. I'd like to see more. I'd like to see more coming out on what's behind it. Okay. You have them out there foraging. They're gonna get to that large size. They're gonna put on the fat and everything. It takes longer. Okay, the cow's doing it more slowly. Okay, we talked about how I work at the abattoir. That's a small abattoir just down the road. For the listeners who don't know, we only process somewhere between 5 to 10 cattle every week, between 10 and 20 sheep, a couple of pigs. Occasionally, we have interesting animals get brought in, like elk, deer, or I wasn't there, but the guy actually did an ostrich one time. Okay,
wow, that's cool.
So one of my jobs is I'm the guy who cleans out the inside of the animals, and I open up the rumens and I have to dump out the rumen contents. And very, very interesting, because when you see the all forage fed animals, okay, there's a very sweet sauerkraut pickling smell to the rumen. Okay, and it's not a noxious smell at all. With a little bit of grain in the diet, it's pretty much the same thing. Okay, but I do find that small amount of grain in the diet, you will see what looks like better, fuller animals. Like they just look a little extra fat. Okay. And we do see the ones that were given a very high grain diet, and that, I got to tell you right now, that stinks. When you open up a rumen and there's a lot of grain in there, you'll want to throw up. It just smells almost rotten.
Wow.
Especially when it's a high corn diet. Imagine taking a bowl of cream corn and leaving it out in the July heat for 3 hours or 4 hours and coming back and smelling it. Yeah. That's about what it smells like. It's pretty gross.
Wow.
Now, my personal observation, a lot of the homesteaders, like people who just buy their own 2 or 3 cows to feed their families, okay? we will process their animals for them at that abattoir. And I see a lot of people will give them a very high corn diet. And it's funny because the animal comes in, I'll look at it, and you'll see a skinny, bony animal. So it's not got a good fat finish. That's the thing. Like, it's not properly finished.
Huh.
We kill it. We start to skin it. We take the insides out, open up that rumen, and I see that high corn concentration in there. And I'd love to see more science done on this, because it really makes me wonder why it's something. There's things that are, and I need an animal nutritionist to really get involved with this. But it's like, you know what? Putting too much grain in there isn't doing the animal any favor. It seems to be working the opposite way.
That's interesting.
Now,
yeah, sorry, go ahead. I don't want to cut you.
Yeah, when you're talking about actual feedlots and stuff like that, you got professionals running those. You got vets monitoring it. So when they put the grain in, those guys know what they're doing, and they know how much to put in it. Same, I worked at a dairy. I helped out at a dairy farm last year, and it was just a little bit of grain in the diet, enough to boost the cows' nutrients up to make them highly productive. Okay, so it seems like the ones that really have the science on this, same thing I see out of them is they don't put like a whole lot of grain in the diet.
Wow. Now, is it the same thing, Rick, with sheep and goats, or is it a little bit different as far as the grass versus grain? Do they eat grains at all, or are they pickier? How does that work?
You get the same effects. Like I find for most of the sheep I deal with, sheep are really, really, really efficient energy converters of grass. Like, every sheep farmer pretty much knows that if they bother giving them grain, it's not going to be very much at all, because, and I've yet to see a sheep that had a huge portion of grain in its diet. I think everybody raises sheep and has an understanding there, realizes like, let these animals eat the green, so to speak. They do very well. They fatten very easy. Sheep grow quickly. That's one of the things that you'll find. Goats are similar. They'll fatten very easily too. Goats have a very broad diet though. Like, they'll go up in the trees. They'll clean bushes clean, as well as eat grasses, legumes, and stuff like that. So looking at it from what I see at the abattoir, the results there, as far as if a person was just getting into farming, okay, and they really didn't understand how to properly grass finish a cattle, if that's what they wanted to do, I would recommend get sheep. It's easier to do, okay? They're easier to manage, and you'll see that they put the weight on because sheep grow faster and quicker. Like a lamb's ready for market in 6 to 8 months. Okay. Wow. Cattle, the largest breeds of cattle out there, like we're talking like Charolais and stuff like that, you're looking at between 14 to 18 months. Usually around the 18-month mark is where they're at that finishing weight. So you can see the growth rate is different. Okay. Wow. And the efficiency, my opinion, is that sheep are just more efficient than cattle at putting on weight and meat and fat.
Now, would there be as big of a difference between, like sheep or lamb from your farm or a grass-fed local farm, or lamb from the store? Because it's easy to say the beef is much different, but is the lamb also much different, or am I not comparing apples to apples?
Well, that's going to be a tricky one to get into, because I've eaten a lot of lamb out of the stores.
Okay.
First off, let's look at where like Ontario lamb sources come from. We produce a decent amount, okay? But we get a lot from New Zealand, and we get a bunch from Australia as well. Although I think in the next year or two, Australia is going to back off because they had huge death loss of their sheep population. We'll see. New Zealand, though, big exporter to the globe of lamb. Okay. If you're talking New Zealand lamb, I can pretty much, I would say that it's almost its whole life on pasture. Maybe not likely to have very much grass grain in its diet at all. Okay. That's the other thing too. Sheep are actually easy to finish properly too. Like I've tasted store-bought lamb, and it's usually pretty good. Mm-hmm. There's not too often people screw it up. Okay. I think even the guy that I work with who owns the abattoir has been butchering animals for over 30 years. And he said, it's only really one one couple in the last decade or so he talked about that just really, really did a horrible job of raising sheep.
Wow.
And I won't get the details there, but he had a talk with them, and very stern talk with about how to raise animals properly. Because the only reason I can see that sheep don't put on weight and fat quickly is when they got a parasite or they're sick or they're injured. Okay. That'll be about the only reason from my own experiences that I've seen that they don't put on weight quickly. Taste wise, like lamb, most lamb has a similar taste. I can't even say it. I got to be honest with you. So, if you get someone who does very well, good quality New Zealand lamb, I can't guarantee I can tell it if you did a blind test with myself and my own lamb. Okay. I have a good idea what my own lamb looks like because I recognize, like I've killed when I'm at the abattoir, I'm the one who kills them, and I see them hanging up, and I look at the meat and all that stuff. So I have a good idea what it looks like, but I can't guarantee for sure just looking at it. I know the stuff I have now because it's in my freezer and it's what I brought back from the abattoir. But that's an interesting thing that you brought up, and I hadn't even thought about it till now because you deal with beef, you can get garbage, like stuff not properly done at all that just like tastes like you might as well eat cardboard. It tastes that terrible. Then you get good quality beef, whether it's grain or grass-fed finished beef. Because I have had some beef that had grain in it, and it was like grain fed to it, and it's actually like it can be pretty tasty at times too. And then I've had my beef, which of course that's pretty much for my own for beef right now. 99% of the beef I eat is my own. It took me a year or two to really get the timing of the grazing management down. And then there's people have asked, well, why don't you harvest early in the spring for the barbecue season? I tell them there's a reason why. Like the people, like you've tried our beef, nice fatty beef, okay, pasture finished. I can't get that in early spring. Yeah. Okay, because they're using up their winter reserves. They're transitioning to a spring diet. And then around May, when they go on pasture, they start to come on to fresh grass. They still have hay in their diet, so there's a transition period. And they've lost a lot of fat, so you're going to get like very tough, chewy meat. In 2017, 2018, we did process like June beef, and it was like the ground was okay, it was no different, right? But the steak cuts, the prime rib steaks, the T-bones, they weren't the same. And our customer said, you know what? There's just they basically all said the same thing, and whether they realized or not, they wanted more fat. Okay, and that's why we are at a point where we harvest in July and we harvest in August, sometimes in September. Summer out there, they're gaining all that summer grass, getting the time to put the fat back on. Remember, these cows, sheep, goats, they're putting the fat on for a reason. They're putting the fat on after they've had babies, because we calve in June, we lamb in February, March. They're putting the fat back on to get ready to have another baby, because nature has designed all the mammals to reproduce pretty much every year. Okay, and to get ready, because we live in a northern environment, okay, we use breeds that are all from northern environments. They're getting ready for the winter harshness that's coming. So the more fat you put on, okay, you're going to get through that winter the dormancy much better. More fat is more reserved. So that's why the harvest of our meat is set up in a certain way. Now, there is, like, for example, this year we have a 12-year-old cow. She's no longer able to conceive, so we're going to be retiring her. She's going in at the end of April, but she's she's over 30 months. So the law in Canada basically states we have to do it's a high-risk protocol. So all her spine section gets removed. We lose a lot of the good steak cuts because of Canadian laws on food safety. Anything over 30 months, okay, OTM over 30 months, they treat as suspect, and they get certain parts in case of that 1 in 10 million or 50 million chances that it might be mad cow. And that's a whole nother different, that's nothing to actually do with mad cow prevention. That's more to do with pleasing our trade partners and pleasing like just
Wow.
doing stuff for bureaucratic sake, in my opinion, anyways.
Yeah.
If you ask the government officials to say, "Oh, it's all for food safety and ensuring our supply is healthy,"
Yeah.
well, we just got a different of opinions on that one.
Yeah.
That being said,
I don't think a cow
I
goes
was
bad after 30 months.
yeah the sorry, I just got to check the time there.
No, no problem. Yeah.
I got to wrap this up soon. I got to get up early tomorrow, but
Yep. Definitely.
on that one, like, I don't agree with the law, but I will respect it. So when we take this little girl in, we lose, like, we still get a lot of meat out of her, okay, but it's mostly going to be ground and some soup steaks and stuff like that, and we lose everything off the spine. So we're losing T-bone,
Ribs.
I believe, with sirloin and prime rib. Okay, and that's just the way it is. I respect the law, and we're not going to fiddle with it. It's like, take for example, like the raw milk issue. I've drank raw milk from my own cows. I'm allowed to, right? I own them. And I realize, like other countries, they do raw milk for production for customers and don't have any issues with it. But the law here in Canada doesn't allow it. I don't agree with it, but for now, we just got to support. So anyways, is there any other quick questions you have before we wrap it up?
Well, I just wanted to let you know, I said that I do love the beef. I love the lamb. I love all the products from there. I've actually been really enjoying the liver lately. I want to know, if I can, before I get you off, is there any quick tip, or is there any secret to doing the beef jerky or the liver jerky, or is it just put it on and turn it on?
What I do, okay, is my cousin's the one kind of show me how to use my own dehydrator.
Okay.
My cousin, the chef. I salt my jerky with sea salt, let it sit overnight.
Okay.
Then I cut it up in the size strips I want. I put it on the dehydrator, and it'll be on there for about 16 hours or so.
Okay.
And I just let the dehydrator do the work.
Yep. So for
my wife.
So for the liver, do you have the ones that are already sliced, like I got the liver from you, same way?
Yeah. Scotty does it up in slices, but he slices up the way people typically would cook it.
Yeah.
So when I make liver jerky, I'm cutting it down even further than that.
Strips. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'll have to give it a shot then. And really, are you just using salt, or are you using a special recipe? You gonna share with me?
Just sea salt. Yeah.
Perfect.
I like to keep things pretty simple. Like, but Lisa and I have noticed that with our steaks and our lamb chops, when we do it on the barbecue, sea salt, that's the only seasoning. We like to taste the meat as it is.
Absolutely. That's one of the things I've noticed going carnivore itself, and that's why I love your meat so much, that salt, and that's it. If you have to hide it with 10 different to 15 different spices, then you're hiding the meat, as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, I love it. And thank you so much, Rick. Well, I know my listeners, my viewers are going to love this again. It's been a pleasure. I hope we can do this again another couple months to see what it's like in the spring, of course. And yeah, any parting words or any last words you want to share with my listeners? Any advice to save the planet? It's not going to be fake meat, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'll give you a very quick tip. For farmers like myself, we do charge a little bit more for meats because we're small scale. All right, we're taking longer to finish. We got no other choice. If we didn't charge good prices, we would end up losing our farms. For you carnivore folks out there and omnivores, you don't have to buy all your meat from sources like us. But when you can, try to treat yourself once in a while. And believe it or not, you're making a difference if you only buy a little bit from us. If you get lucky, and you start getting more wealthier, or you win the lottery, or you just doing better financially, or as my vision for the future is that eventually, like 30 years from now or sooner, all the meat is grown in a similar fashion to this. Exactly. And I'd like to see us triple red meat production once we get society to understand the value of it, both for your health and for the environment.
Absolutely. Well, that's perfect parting words, Rick. Thank you so much again. Please give my best to Lisa, and we'll be in touch very soon. Thank you so much. Okay. Awesome.